Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ, and today we're back with another very detailed weather update for the Australian continent. We're going to be talking about some heavy rainfall that's moving through New South Wales this morning. We're also going to be talking about a strong cold front that's expected to impact the south of the nation over the coming couple of days. We're going to be talking about the far North Queensland rainfall situation as well, where a lot of rainfall has fallen and a little bit more is still expected. And we'll also take a look at a strong cold front that's expected to impact the southwest of Western Australia in the next couple of days. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please do consider subscribing, and if you haven't already, leave a like on the video. Your support is greatly appreciated. So taking a look at the satellite picture right now, you can see that New South Wales is the main story right now. There's a lot of clouds streaming through New South Wales, and that is bringing some light to moderate rainfall across the central parts and now the eastern parts of the state, with rainfall extending as far out as the New South Wales-Queensland border and the New South Wales coastline around Coffs Harbour and Grafton. It's all being powered by a cut-off low-pressure system that's currently situated still in South Australia, but starting to move into New South Wales at this time, and it's dumped quite a lot of rainfall over the past 24 to 72 hours. In fact, some locations in northwestern New South Wales have picked up over 100 millimetres of rainfall, so very good rainfall has been reported out there, and it surprisingly hasn't been too much in the way of flooding either, although I do imagine it'll take a couple of days for these river levels to catch up to their flooding marks, and there's a few rivers out there that don't actually have flood warnings, even if they do burst their banks and whatnot, because they are just so remote and it's not worth the Bureau of Meteorology's time to track them. But still, some very heavy rainfall has been reported, and it is ongoing right now. We'll jump into the forecast in just a second, but we're going to take a look at the 12-hour radar loop for this part of New South Wales and also South Australia, and you can just see there's been light to moderate rainfall streaming in from the north and into the eastern parts of the state. It's kind of missed Queensland, unfortunately, but the majority of it falling between Lightning Ridge and Tibooburra in New South Wales, kind of along that line, and it's now making itself as far south as Griffith and Orange in southern New South Wales, rather. Like I said, soaking rainfall. It's very good for the farmers out here, and it doesn't look too heavy either, to the point where it's going to be causing flooding problems. Let's take a look at the rainfall forecast right now. The Eastern Relief model is still expecting this soaking kind of rainfall, 6 to 10 millimetres every 3 hours, and that's going to continue over the next 24 hours or so as it gets itself into the more eastern parts of New South Wales. This cut-off low starts to materialise over the top of Victoria. Now, this cut-off low is very important for the long-term forecast, and you'll see that in just a second. It's going to be powering this cold front sort of trough line extending through New South Wales, bringing in a lot of moisture from Queensland from early tomorrow morning, and you can see that's going to be dumping up to 25 millimetres for some locations. This low-pressure system will then get itself offshore, kind of offshore from the Victoria-New South Wales border, to be honest, south of Bega around Mallacoota, and it's going to wrap itself up into a strong low-pressure system with some pretty strong wind gusts and deliver some rainfall to the Furneaux Islands and Tasmania as well. Nothing too heavy. Still, like you can see on the rainfall accumulation map over the next 3 days, we're looking at up to 25 millimetres for parts of Tasmania and the Furneaux Islands. We're also looking at some good rainfall for parts of Victoria too, but the main feature, of course, still being New South Wales. Some very good rainfall expected to continue falling through New South Wales. 25 millimetres is kind of widespread and expected for locations between Renaring down to Cobar and Griffith, and then inland, and then out to the coastline, basically. So some very good and widespread rainfall is expected for agricultural communities, but you can see there are still some patches that are expecting some good amounts of rainfall, up to 50 millimetres north of Moree on the Queensland side of things. So some very good rainfall is still possible and still expected throughout the course of today. There are a couple of places that have picked up some very good rainfall. This one here out at Burke Airport has picked up 42 millimetres in the past 24 hours, and some widespread accumulations above 20 to 25 millimetres, and that's on top of 50 millimetres that they received yesterday as well out here. So there's been some very good rainfall, and as the forecast models predicted, up to 100 to 120 millimetres has fallen from this weather event, or is expected to fall from this weather event, because there are still some places that are going to pick up some very good rainfall out here throughout the course of today. I've just been flashing it through on the weather observations. You can see widespread 20 to 30 millimetres, and some pockets up towards 40 or 50 millimetres. So some very good rainfall has been picked up in this part of rural New South Wales, into the pastoral districts and now into the agricultural districts. The rainfall is starting to pick up there as well. You might have also been able to notice at the start of this video, we have a strong low pressure system now situated in the Great Australian Bight. It's well towards the south, but it's going to be bringing a nice helping of cold front activity through over the coming couple of days. This cold front here is expected to continue continue moving south of Tasmania and wither out over the coming 24 hours, but which we will touch on later. The cold front that's expected to impact Perth on Tuesday and Wednesday will then move into the Great Australian Bight, and considering it is a strong cold front here, we're expecting showers and thunderstorms to develop across the South Australian coastline from about Wednesday evening onwards into the early Thursday morning, and then from Thursday morning into early Thursday afternoon we're expecting showers and storms to develop across Victoria and Tasmania. Now there will be damaging winds along the coastline, especially for exposed coastal locations that typically get blasted by northerly or northwesterly winds in these cold fronts. So Tasmania and King Island especially at risk in this cold front here. It's expected to be quite strong. Kangaroo Island in South Australia as well, and the Eyre Peninsula or the west coast of the Eyre Peninsula also in the firing line for some pretty strong winds, but it's mainly going to be moderate to isolated heavy falls across South Australia throughout Wednesday evening into early Thursday morning, and then moderate rainfall for Victoria and moderate falls as well for Tasmania. Like you can see on the rainfall accumulation map, nothing too crazy is expected here, and it's not really worth too much discussion, but for the Eyre Peninsula and areas around Ceduna and Streaky Bay, expecting up towards 20 millimetres of rainfall from this cold front. Adelaide itself expecting a very healthy 30 millimetres of rainfall. That is great news for them. And then down here in the agricultural and the pastoral districts of South Australia and the southeastern quadrant of the state, you're looking at widespread totals above 15 to 20 millimetres into some places, but again, there will be places that completely miss out on the rainfall. Victoria looking at a healthy 10 to 15 millimetres, maybe 20 to 30 in some places. Melbourne actually expecting 30 millimetres, and I believe the majority of that will fall on Thursday. A little bit more rainfall coming through on Friday, but I don't think it'll make it into the 5-day forecast period. But in short, some pretty good rainfall is coming through for this part of the nation. Tasmania as well expecting some good rainfall. I don't think this cold front is going to be powerful enough to bring much snow in the way for Tasmania, but it does actually bring some in for New South Wales, Victoria, and even the northern parts of New South Wales. That's very interesting, and I didn't expect that to see northern New South Wales get snow instead of the Tasmanian area, and we'll see if we can pull that through on the forecast models here. Yeah, it does look like sometime Friday evening some snowfall is recorded on the northern mountains parts of New South Wales, so that's a little bit interesting as well, and a little bit of a side topic. It does look like temperatures are going to be conducive to some snowfall up there, so it could be their first good amount of snowfall this year. Temperatures going close to zero, but not quite below zero, so we're going to have to watch out for that. That's going to be a bit of a wild card on the forecast, and I'll be bringing you more updates on that with the system if it does actually materialise. Tasmania, interestingly, getting no snow from this weather event, but it looks like they're going to be getting some pretty good wind gusts. If we take a look at the 5-day wind accumulation map across the parts of southern Australia that are going to be affected by this cold front, you're looking at widespread gusts above 60 or 70 kilometres an hour for this part of the coast, all of the South Australian coast, kind of towards the east of Port Lincoln, expecting some pretty strong wind gusts as well. The Victorian coastline kind of is spared because it's going to be coming out of the north, but still into Port Phillip Bay around Melbourne, you're expecting some pretty good wind gusts to at least 70 kilometres an hour across exposed locations. So just make sure that you are ready for some isolated damaging winds throughout Thursday or Wednesday afternoon into Thursday, because it will get a little bit gusty for one or two locations. That basically does it for the coverage on this front. We're going to jump up north into far North Queensland now and talk about the rainfall up there. They have actually received quite a good amount of rainfall over the past 3 or 4 days. There were locations that picked up 130 millimetres from that rainfall event that I was talking about that was going to happen on Friday, and then over the weekend there was other places that picked up 50 millimetres on Saturday and about 25 millimetres on Sunday. The rainfall just now starting to ease off, but you can see over the next 10 days the eastern Bev highlighting the chance of up to 50 millimetres falling, and a lot of rainfall extending across the central and far North Queensland coastlines. And what is this going to be powered by? Well, we're going to have to take a look at the forecast models here. You can see some light showers still continuing around the far North Queensland, the Cassowary coast throughout the course of today. They're going to pick up a little bit tonight and into early tomorrow morning, but nothing really to write home about. Only 15 to 20 millimetres is expected. But yeah, it's going to be pretty typical rainforest weather up there. And then you can see some showers starting to stream through on Wednesday evening into Thursday and Friday morning. And we're going to be looking at a low pressure system develop into the Coral Sea, somewhere in the central parts of the Coral Sea Islands territory. And it looks like this low pressure system is going to start to bring a little bit of rainfall and a little bit of moisture ashore. It doesn't look like it's supported amongst the forecast models. The GFS is saying nothing, and the Access G3 as well is saying nothing. It's just the Eastern Bev that's expecting this this weak low pressure system to develop offshore. But if it does develop, it's going to be bringing some heavy rainfall to the central and the far North Queensland coastlines. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning this, even though it looks pretty absurd on the forecast models, is it does happen once or twice a year, this sort of weather event. So it isn't entirely unplausible at this time. It might just be a model fluke of something that's happening 8 to 10 days out in the future. But considering it's going to be dumping a reasonable amount of rainfall, 50 millimeters up here could actually mean up towards 130 millimeters, because there are places that receive 2 to 2.5, maybe even 3 times as much rainfall as what the forecast models say, because of the fact the forecast models just can't crank out the data for those mountain valleys where the rainfall is normally 3 times as high as what the forecast does suggest. So that's some reasonably good rainfall that could be causing some flooding up here in far North Queensland, and it is worth a mention. So for those up here interested in the weather, just keep monitoring the forecast closely. The Bureau of Meteorology will have nothing on this system until probably maybe Wednesday or Thursday when their forecast releases then, but I will just keep you updated on this weather system. It doesn't look overly likely, and it is the first time that I've seen it on the forecast models, but just a heads up that there is some good rainfall potentially on the cards. And even for the coast down into Queensland, into the Sunshine Coast, some good rainfall expected over the next sort of 5 to 10 days as well, up to 30 millimeters. Brisbane, however, missing out on the majority of that rainfall. Just a couple of drops expected there, nothing to really talk about. To finish off this video, we're going to show Western Australia some love. You can see over the next 10 days, the southwest corner are expecting even more rainfall on top of the 30 millimeters that actually passed through in the cold front on the weekend. Now, I did say that I wasn't expecting too much rainfall from that cold front. There were places that actually picked up some decent falls. I was bang on the money for the forecast for my area. We picked up 15 millimeters, and I was saying between 10 and 20 millimeters, so that was pretty good. However, I do think that it was a little bit wetter than what the Bureau of Meteorology and all the forecast models were saying. So it's a little bit of good news. It's some much needed rainfall for this part of Western Australia, but still a little bit of a surprise, especially into Sunday morning when the rainfall wouldn't really let off until the sun rose. Now, I'm going to pull this forecast back to tomorrow around early morning to lunchtime. We're going to be looking at some showers streaming in to the Perth metro area from about 8 or 9 a.m. So just take some extra care when you're on the roads to the morning commute tomorrow morning, because it does look like it's going to be a little bit wet. It's going to be some thunderstorms around as well for the southwest capes, developing from around lunchtime. They'll get themselves into the Perth metro area sometime around 3 or 4 p.m. So like I said, on the evening commute, to take extra care on the roads. Just drive slowly, drive to the conditions. It's absolutely not a race, because these conditions look like we're seeing some pretty good thunderstorms move through the Perth metro area, and still, considering how warm the Lewin Current is, I'd not be surprised if a belt of very heavy rainfall streamed into the Perth metro area around 4 to 6 p.m. So we'll just keep a very close eye on this weather system. It looks like a pretty slow moving and thick band of moderate to isolated heavy pockets of rainfall is streaming ashore for a couple of hours on Tuesday evening. It does look like it picks up a little bit late into Tuesday night before easing off early Wednesday morning, and those showers come through from Wednesday. The Bureau of Meteorology actually highlighting up to 35 millimeters of rainfall for the Perth metro area tomorrow, so that's a very good drop or two. It's one of the heaviest amounts of rainfall that I've seen on the forecast so far in the past couple of months for winter. So the Bureau of Meteorology being really optimistic with the amount of rainfall, but they're also highlighting that it is going to be a very uncertain amount of rainfall, between 10 and 35 millimeters. I think it's going to be closer to the higher end of that forecast. All the forecast models saying between 20 and 35 millimeters, and if I had to put a number on it, I'm going to say probably 20 to 25 millimeters. 35 might be a little bit bullish, but for those in the hills, especially around Bickley and down towards Armidale, I would not be surprised if you picked up 50 millimeters of rainfall. So again, take extra care on the roads. There is a chance of flooding or flash flooding in some areas, especially Tuesday night and into early Wednesday morning. We're probably going to be waking up to a little bit of wind damage as well, some snap twigs and so forth around the place on Wednesday morning, because those wind gusts are actually going to be quite high, especially along the south coast. We're looking at wind gusts up to 90, maybe even 100 kilometres an hour for some areas. Perth coastal regions expecting slightly weaker winds, around 60 to 70 kilometres an hour as a peak, so nothing too crazy there. But I do expect that we're going to be waking up to some few snap twigs and some pretty big puddles on Wednesday morning. So like I said, just take extra care on those roads. It is necessary to stay safe in a weather event like this. Now, rainfall accumulation you can see over the coming 3 days doesn't really change much over the course of the 10-day forecast period, just a little bit coming through towards the end of the forecast. Now, that means that it's going to be relatively dry from next week onwards. Just a few drops of rainfall here and there expected next weekend, with which the Bureau of Meteorology has highlighted again in a pretty uncertain forecast. They're only calling for a couple of mil, but they're not 100% sure about what's actually going to be happening. And it looks like we get a run of relatively dry weather until the later parts of July, when this big cold front starts to sweep in again. But once again, not really reciprocated on the forecast models. The GFS likes it, but the Axis G3 doesn't really know what it's talking about here. So it is a little bit of uncertainty. This is for Wednesday, the 17th of July. So it does look like some pretty stable conditions and some dry conditions are expected after this cold front moves through. So just a heads up on that one. Looks like the rainfall might peter down for a couple of days. And once the rainfall dies off, that means that the cold conditions are going to step in. From Thursday onwards, we're expecting some pretty cold mornings across the southwest land divisions, especially into the wheat belt. Conditions will go very close to zero, and if not below zero in one or two locations. And these cold conditions making it as far north as the Pilbara region, as well as far north as Mount Augustus. We're still looking at single-digit degree lows, so it's going to be very cold across a lot of Western Australia. So for those tourists moving through the state, just make sure you've got an extra blanket or two. It is going to be very, very cold indeed. Get yourself closer to the coastline, where the conditions will be a little bit more mild, than things warming up in the head of that next cold front that's going to be coming through. But again, we're just going to have to wait and see. The forecast does look a little bit uncertain over the coming couple of weeks. I really haven't been able to put my finger on a long-term forecast. It does look like we're going to be moving into a wetter than average part of the end of July and into August. The Bureau of Meteorology actually revised their forecast for the end of winter. They're now calling for significantly above average rainfall. That is a good change in their forecast. I do think that's entirely plausible, and I do think the rainfall will begin to ease off. However, it's sort of towards the end of August in terms of winter. I did say a short and sharp winter, and I do still stand by that prediction. So, and that's what the Bureau of Meteorology has also jumped on board with. So that's great to see. That gives me much more confidence in my forecast. So yeah, very good to see. Anyways, that's about all that I have time for this morning. Thank you so much for watching at this point. If you're wondering why my voice sounds a little bit funny, well, I did have, like I said in the community post yesterday, I did have kind of a 1 or 2 day sickness. Wasn't pleasant at all, but I do feel a lot better this morning, and I'm very glad of it. Thank you so much for sticking by me. It's been an absolutely great start of the year so far in terms of how this channel has grown, and I do continue to want to grow it. We've just hit 16,000 subscribers, so thank you so much for the recent support in the channel. It is much appreciated. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing, and also leave a like on the video. Your support is greatly appreciated. Give me a weather report for your location in the comment section and below. I look forward to responding to them throughout the course of today. That's all from me this morning, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.